Welcome to People Love Process. Whenever I have a chance to create personal art and design that isn't client driven, I always pick a genre, a style, or theme I find interesting and fun. This makes the creative process to achieve it easier. Because of that, you tend to do a higher level of work because you naturally enjoy it. So if you're going to approach doing something for no other reason than being creative, I suggest you do the same thing. Pick something that you're interested in. Don't pick a theme or a topic or even a style that really has no interest for you, because it's going to make it a whole lot harder to stick with it and learn through it. And such is the case with this movie specifically. Several of those who have watched my content so far on the YouTube channel have asked me questions about the shape building tool and why, for most types of shape building, I prefer and use the Pathfinder palette instead. Well, in this movie, I'm going to create a samurai motif in response to these questions and demonstrate how I use the shape building tool to pull off a specific style that would be far more complex to do using the Pathfinder methods. So this is going to be a fun one, so let's get started. It all starts for me with inspiration. It doesn't take a whole lot to inspire me to create something. I spend too much time on YouTube, and I try not to spend too much time there, but it never fails. I'll find some obscure video. In this case, one day, it was a style of classical Japanese dance called, I might be mispronouncing this wrong, but bugaku. And it has all these people in these elaborate costumes as shown here. And all they're doing is they're doing these ceremonial dances. Now, going back in history, it was for the imperial palace. Now it's more art than it is for anything related to leadership and entertaining their whims. It's more of a cultural thing in Japan, but it's really beautiful to watch. The costumes are what make it amazing. I'm not really into dance theater and stuff, but the costumes are what drew me in. I watched it, I go, God, that's kind of cool. That one costume is awesome. And this is a photograph showing one of those dancers in that type of production. But I decided I want to do an illustration and kind of capture kind of the ornamental aspects of the costume, but I picked a theme that I'm more interested in, derived from the same culture, which is samurai. So I start looking at samurai reference, and this comes from a museum shot of an actual samurai helmet and part of the mask that they would tend to wear. I love the dragon on top. It's kind of like of a bird dragon with almost antlers too, which is kind of cool. And so this was one reference. I looked at a different reference from a different point of view, and I'm not completely sure what they call these, kind of the U-shaped kind of motif at the top of their helmet, but I definitely want to kind of capture a lot of these elements. Now, the style I'm going to be working in isn't going to be distinctly realistic. It's going to be very graphic and stylized, simplified down into shapes. But these will give me all the information to know what's going to kind of communicate that idea of a samurai. That's why I'm looking at them. And for me, it all starts with drawing, but this is the simplest type of drawing you can do, just simple shape drawing. If you can draw a circle and a square and a triangle, then you can approach this style yourself, and it's not going to be difficult. It's just figuring out a nice balance of those elements to communicate the theme that you're trying to capture. In this artwork, it's a samurai. Knowing I'm going to use very geometric shapes to form it, I started drawing in a symmetric fashion, meaning I don't worry about drawing the whole right side here. I kind of drew part of the nose and other elements a little bit, but it's just one side I want to complete, because ultimately I'll take this sketch in at this stage and just scan it in using a flatbed scanner, bring it into Photoshop, and then I'll just go ahead and reflect it over into Photoshop to make sure it's looking the way I want. And I think this is going to work fine. And once I do that, I save out a bitmap TIFF, place it into Illustrator like this, go to transparency panel, and I usually set it between 15 or 20%. So if we go ahead and adjust the opacity, I'll lock that layer so it doesn't move. And then on preceding layers above it, I'll just start building shapes. Now, what's the easiest possible shape to discern out of my drawing here? Well, that's easy. It's the circular shapes. I don't have to create anything. I just have to use the ellipse tool to create each one of these ellipses, circles, to add to my motif. So those were easy. Those are always the first things I focus on, is the most simple shapes. Create those first, get them out of the way, and then I go from there. Now, once again, if you think in shapes, it's going to make figuring out how to create vector art a lot easier. So I want to go over dynamic shapes because this is something that a lot of people don't think much of. And within Illustrator, especially when you utilize plugins, I use astutegraphics.com, makes all these plugins. I don't use all their plugins, but there's a handful I use every single day. And one of them is Vector Scribe. That's a plugin that has multiple tools. So if you go to the tools palette, all of these are the tools that come with Vector Scribe, but under these, you have additional tools. So I'll use Path Scribe to kind of form and shape my paths. This operates the same way and pre-existed native tools in Illustrator. Matter of fact, Adobe kind of ripped off Astute Graphics, but just didn't implement some of the features as well as Astute does, and doesn't continue to develop on them, which Astute also does. That's why I love this company. They produce awesome software, and it makes life easier in Adobe Illustrator. So you can see 4 tools here, and you can also see let's see, this is their dynamic corners, which does a lot of cool stuff, much like the rounding corners tool inside of Illustrator. And if you prefer that, not having a plugin to do rounding, that's fine. I use both actually because there's benefits of both. And one of the benefits of the dynamic corners tool is I can go to something like a circle, which Illustrator methods won't show any kind of rounding ability because it's a circle. Well, that's why I use dynamic corners, because sometimes I want the top of the circle because that's circulars. That's why I drew this elliptical shape. But when it comes to the bottom, I'm just going to pull it out like this because I'm going to use this to interact with this larger oval I also drew out using the circular, the ellipse tool shape. I always want to say circle but you can do perfect circles by holding the shift key. You know, you can draw a perfect circle, but if you let go of the shift, then you can draw a ellipse. So it doesn't matter whichever way you want to do it. In this case, I did a giant ellipse. All we're going to do is clone this, Command C, Command F. I have keyboard shortcuts set up so I never have to do those commands. I always say it so you know what I'm doing. If you watch my keyboard shortcuts movie on my YouTube channel, you can see all the shortcuts because those appear in every single movie. I've been using them for over 15 years now, and it speeds up the work process. So when I do a Command C, Command F, I just hit the F3 key. That's made a copy of this elliptical shape. You didn't see anything change. I'll go over to the tool like Reflect, find a central anchor point. I have Smart Guides turned on, Command U. So when I hover over an anchor, I know that I'm there. I click and I reflect it over to get that copy of the ellipse shape over like that. I'll select both of these. I'll go to the Pathfinder palette and I'll go intersect. So wherever they overlap creates a new shape. Then I'll go ahead and select this shape I originally edited from a circle, and I'll go intersect again to get the final shape and form of the face. And then from this point, all I'm going to do is go in here with the dynamic corners tool. And once again, you could use the Illustrator one and pull it out. But notice once you do that, you have to match it on both sides. So what you have to do is select both of these, and then you can adjust the radius of that curve like that. That's fine. The reason why I like Astute Graphics plugin, and specifically the Dynamic Corners tool, is because I don't have to select anything. As soon as it's over a corner that could be rounded, it shows you, and then you just pull it out where you want. If that looks good, I can go to this one and just click it, and it remembers that setting. So that's kind of why I love that feature. It just makes it easier to do certain things. Once again, if you want to use the corner widget in Illustrator, that's fine. You can do the same thing. It just might take a little longer since you have to pre-select anchors before that rounding will kick in. I continue to use elliptical shapes to figure out stuff. So I'm going to turn these on, and then we're going to zoom in because this looks a little confusing. It really isn't. And the reason why I did this is because I want to create, I don't know what you'd call this down here, kind of like his beard of sorts, but it's more ornamental looking. I just want those perfect curves. And to get those perfect curves, it makes sense to do shapes such like this. So I would select these two ellipses and go intersect to create that. This ellipse is sitting on top of a larger one, so I'm just going to kind of punch through it using minus front. You know, an engineer named these functions. Unite makes sense. Unite. That's actually a good conceptual word to communicate that. This one, okay, guys, next. Unite, we have that. Let's figure out the name for the next one. And some engineer, how about minus front? What the hell does that mean? But they went with it. So I always say punch because for years, 15 years specifically, I use Macromedia freehand. And that's what the functionality, these aren't proprietary to Illustrator. This type of Boolean technology is what it's called. It's common in every software program, whether you use Affinity, whether you use CorelDRAW for that matter, or in this case, Illustrator. So in freehand, they called it punch. And that makes a whole lot more sense because that's what you do. You're punching through that bottom shape with the top shape. Once we have these, I'm going to go ahead and unite these together. And you can see it creates most of it. But we don't want it to have this treatment on top. So this is where throwaway shapes come in. Throwaway shapes meaning I'll take another couple elliptical shapes like this, once again made with the elliptical tool, and I'll go ahead and unite those with Pathfinder, and then I'll select this shape, and I'm just going to minus front out of that to get that. I might have to select these corners and slide that up to cover the top. And now with these two selected, I can trim that top edge so it aligns with my drawing. So that's how I use Pathfinder. And a lot of people who've seen me use Pathfinder in various things, I've been asked several times, at least 3 times by people, well, wouldn't you want to use the shape building tool? Well, no, not really, because it's a lot faster just to use this for this specific type of building. So that's why I use both. And I'm going to show you a specific context in which I think it's faster to use the shape building tool. But when I'm building core shapes like this on a motif like this, I don't worry about that. I just want to hurry up and build it and create it the way I need to create it. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to take this and this little visor, I guess, part of the helmet on the samurai. I want to define the edge of his eye, but I don't want to just create a shape. I want this to be a perfect kind of offset of this. So that's where we're going to go to path. We're going to go to offset and open it up, and 10, well, I don't know if we want to go 10 or maybe smaller. Let's preview it. That's a little small, maybe 12 even. Let's see what that looks like. That might be a bit much. Maybe we cut it in half. We do 11. That looks pretty good. We'll just go with 11, and I'll select these two. And oops, see, the visor shape needs to be on top. Otherwise, it's the circle knocking out of the visor, and we don't want that. So we're going to go ahead and bring this to the top. And once again, I have a keyboard shortcut to do that, F5. Otherwise, I'd have to go to Object, Arrange, Bring to Front. Notice I have F5. That way I never have to go there. I haven't used those pull-down menus in years because I just use keyboard shortcuts. That's why it's important to set up your own for common routine things you do all the time. It's just, think of it, 15 years of not having to go pull down a menu. How much time that saved me? maybe a few hours of my life not wasted because of that. That's why I do it. So we're going to go minus front. Now we have the eye. We can clone it. Once again, another F3 key to clone the shape. Go to the reflect tool, find a central anchor point with smart guides turned on, and reflect it over to get the eye. So that's the way I usually build with Pathfinder. Let's create the nose. I'll start off with this kind of shape for the base of the nose, 2 elliptical shapes here. We're just going to kind of make a, select these 2, actually. First, he needs 2 nostrils, so he needs it on the other side. Let's go ahead and clone these. Command the F3 key, that's Command C, Command F, and then find a central anchor point, flip it over so we have nostrils on both sides. That's what we want. We'll select the 2 nostrils, select the bridge of the nose, unite them together. We'll select these. We'll go ahead and make sure these are on top, and we're going to unite these. And once again, it's going to turn it to a group, so you want to make it a compound. So it's on top. Then we're going to select the nose, and we'll go minus front. So just to show you what happened, we've created see-through areas which make up his nostrils. And again, we're going to do a nose job with throwaway shapes. Yes, I named my layer nose job just because I thought that was funny and it made me laugh. We're going to take these elliptical shapes again. Once again, not complex shapes here, just use an elliptical tool. And we're going to unite these for no other reason than to do rhinoplasty on our vector artwork and trim it off so we get the nose shape we want that aligns with our drawing. Well, close to our drawing, because this curve is based off of the teeth I'm going to have. I didn't want it straight. So those are the things. I don't worry about drawing perfectly. I make those decisions as I'm building my art. Now, when it's all said and done, with all of our core assets in place, this is what we end up with, is all of our vector shapes being like this. And this is normally how I focus on a design. I don't think about, I might have color in mind, but I don't work in color until I have kind of the geometry, in this case specifically, with the design that's this graphic. And now I'll start building out the final motif. But these are all the elements, all the ingredients, if you will. And when I use the shape building tool, because I want where this shape, for example, overlaps the top of its head, this will be fill. But when it goes into this area, I want this to be negative. Well, to pull that style off, this is going to be confusing like this. So I'm going to do something that seems a little unintuitive, if you will. I'm going to turn this layer on, the exact same artwork minus a few of the elements because I separated these. It's all the same vector shapes. I just have a fill, no stroke, so you can't see anything. And you might think, well, that's kind of odd. Why would you do that? You can't see what you're doing. Actually, you'll be able to just see exactly what you're doing with the shape building tool. That's why I do it. But I also have another layer with other elements we're going to do additional edits on. So I just did that just to set up the artwork to explain it better. But once we have everything, we can just select everything, go to the shape building tool, and this is going to be a positive negative type design. So the shape building tool will fuse shapes together, and it will default. You'll see the cursor has a plus by it. That means it's going to add to shape. So if you have that, all you have to do is just drag it over those areas you want to add. So all these antler parts of his helmet, I guess we'll call it that, these will all fuse together like this. We'll go over on this side and do the same thing over here. That looks great. And then up here, these little elements, we want these to fuse together. So we'll drag it over there with the plus one. In here, I want this to knock out, so it's a see-through. This is where you'll hold the Option key down, and then I'll just click to knock it out. I'll go down here. I want this area to knock out to the background, but as this outer ring goes into the helmet, I don't want it to fuse with it. I want it to do a positive negative positive kind of action with this motif. So I'm going to hold Option down again, not positive, but negative to minus front essentially. These are all using the same Pathfinder methods, the Boolean technology. It's just applied to one tool and modifier keys, in this case, the Option key to hold the minus to minus front. And we're going to do the same thing where these tips come in. These will go to minus. This area of the helmet will be minus. And then as it gets here, this will be positive. This will stay positive. This will go minus. Then the visor will go back into a minus. These areas that overlap will be minus like that. The eyes will minus out. The nose will minus out. This eye will do this left kind of cheek detail, if you will, for lack of better terms. These little, I don't know, dimples. Would you call it dimples on a samurai? I don't know. Just these negative areas here. We'll knock those out. And I'm holding this minus key or the Option key down so it minuses everything. And then we'll go down to the bottom of the mouth, click that. We'll go ahead and do this one and these two areas over here. Now, if you're not talking and trying to explain yourself, this will go even faster. But that's how you can use the shape building tool to do a cool design like this. Now, we're not done because I'm going to turn on these elements, and all these elements, specifically these cut-in shapes here, the circles here, these will all be part of the final motif. So I want those to interact with the elements we've already worked on. So I'm going to select all of them. We'll select the bottom chin motif with the circles down there like this. And then using the same tool, the shape building tool, we'll go here. And if I drag over these areas, it'll minus it out of the artwork underneath like this. And these are the detailing we're putting in on the side of the helmet of the samurai like that. And once again, just holding Option down, dragging over those shapes, and it just minuses front. It uses that same Boolean technology, and these will just click. So where they transcend over the bottom edge of the helmet, they'll go negative. The ones that hang out will be positive, and then these circular shapes here will all go negative like that. So this is how this final motif looks, and it's a lot easier to build this using the shape building tool. If I tried to do this with Pathfinder, it get really confusing fast. So that's the benefit. I don't think it replaces Pathfinder. I just think there's ideal context to use the shape building tool for specific contexts. This is one of them. I use it all the time when I'm building with strokes too, because it's easier to edit strokes using the shape building tool. You'd never want to use Pathfinder for that. So it just depends on the creative context you're creating and what tool to use. The more you get used to it, you'll figure out, oh, I'm working on this today, I'm doing this, I need to use this tool. That's how you want to think in Illustrator. It makes building a lot easier. Let's take a look at how we can put this motif to use. I love it just simple black because I can take a background like this and I could color this red, or maybe this background we color purple. We can take this background, color it this gold color, or maybe green. So I think a simple black image on any of these colors would look pretty cool. But it's a flexible style in that I could select all these, and instead of being black, they could also be white, and I think this works equally as well. So it's a really flexible style. Now, there's a teacher I had in art school. His name was Fred Griffin, and he had a whole design code. And one of his design codes was contour continuation and positive negative. I can't remember the specific rule he had for it, but he would have loved this design because it aligns with a lot of his rules. And at some point, I hopefully can share those rules with you and walk through them, because a lot of great designers coming out of the Seattle area, that's where I went to art school, all learned that way. And I just thought that's the way people learn design, only to find out later it was unique to that area and it's responsible for a lot of great design coming out of the Seattle area over the years, dating back to the late 70s. So something I might cover in an upcoming movie at some point. This also works good color on color. So that works as well. So you can do it this way. It doesn't have to be black, doesn't have to be white. It could just be nice complementary colors on different colored backgrounds. This design specifically, because I was inspired by that Bugaku Imperial Court Theater video, I decided to kind of lock it up as if it was a brand motif for a production company, let's say. And I think this looks cool. I'm going to show you one other thing that I like to do at times. We're going to turn on this circular shape, and I'm going to go ahead and go to my brushes palette. Let's go ahead and pull that out. And you can see I have this grain brush. So I'm going to click on that, and you can see it applies this really cool grainy pattern, kind of a shading type pattern. But we're going to go to stroke because I want to beef this up quite a bit. This is quite small, so we're going to go, let's try 3 times as big. That looks pretty good. Maybe even a little bigger. Let's go a little bigger with it. Okay, that's good. And now I'm just going to go to the transparency palette because I want to adjust the opacity. I don't want black. I want it, we'll try 20, see what that looks. Oops, not 200, 20, like that. That looks good. And now we're going to also change the blend mode to multiply. That way it interacts with the red and you get this deep red color. And I think that looks pretty cool. So I'm going to select the samurai motif. I'm going to copy it, Command-C, Command-F, or hit F3 if you have keyboard shortcuts set up like I do. And we'll move that to this layer because we're going to use that as a mask. And we're going to select both and I'm going to mask it. Once again, to mask, you have to go to Object, with both shapes selected, go Clipping, Mask, and Make. Notice I have F1 because all I have to do is select both, hit F1, boom, done. Once again, an air keyboard shortcut. So watch that movie, and I think you'll figure out what you can do. But look how dramatic this looks. It's a really cool kind of a focus spotlight of sorts, and it just adds some nice drama. So I just wanted to show you how you could handle this in different ways. I like this style because, again, it works great if you invert the colors, white on a dark colored background. So here's a good example of that. And normally when I do this, at times, you might be able to control it over some background that's dark enough that this is going to work on. But what I like to do at times is I'll go and grab the eyedropper and I'll just sample a dark area in terms of this photographic background, like the inside the door where it's really dark, kind of red, and I'll sample that color. I'll go to color here. You can see it's a raw color. That's okay. We're just going to drag it in. I'm going to click into it. Notice all these white rectangle corners. This means it's a global color. We want to turn ours into a global color. I tend to refine the color break. So I'll go to 30. This is almost 100, so I'll just go to 100. This one I'll drop down to 95, and we'll make this one 45. And I'll select this, delete it, and I'll go OK. So now that we have that color added here, we're going to use that as a outer glow on this. So I'm going to select this shape. We're going to go to Effect. We're going to go to Stylize. We're going to go to Outer Glow. Right now it's going to default to a white. We don't want that. We actually want this to be multiplied. And we don't want black. So we're going to click on this. We're going to go to our swatches. We'll go to the color we just added. Click on it. I think this is going to look good, but I don't want it quite that dark. I want it to be a little more subtle, so we'll almost knock it down to half value. And I think we'll bump this up just a little bit in terms of size, and we'll click OK. And you can see how it kind of punches it out a little better. So I do that a lot when I'm kind of setting up example usages, in this case for this design. I love taking something complex visually, like a samurai theme, and turning them into more simplified illustrative designs like this. This would also make a great t-shirt, by the way. I encourage you to think of a theme or genre you like and give this type of process a try using the shape building tool. And if you do, please send me an email and share your design. I'd love to see what you come up with. You can find our email in the description for this movie below. If you enjoy this content, please consider sharing a link to this YouTube channel on your social media. I'd appreciate that a lot. And of course, if you subscribe, you'll always be notified of the most recent content when posted. Thank you for watching People Love Process. I hope this content helps you improve your own creative process.